Hey everyone, this podcast is part of Story Mode, the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. You can support us and gain access to other great exclusive podcasts at patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell.
I'm Tom Ryman.
I'm Jason Pargin.
Yeah, we just watched Funny Games. They weren't that funny.
They were not
games.
that funny. I mean, I wasn't laughing uproariously.
Wir wetten, dass ihr in 12 Stunden alle 3 kaputt seid, okay? A, B und das bist du.
Several hearty chuckles, but never guffaws, never belly laughter.
Yeah. Jason, you suggested this one to us.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I really need to know why.
First of all, thanks for being on.
Because it is October. It is Spooktober.
Excuse me, Shocktober.
It is Shocktober. It is haunted Ween season. And I wanted a scary movie, and this is the scariest movie I have ever seen,
Sure.
or at least the most upsetting. And I realize some people out there, the moment someone says they found a film scary, will feel the need to reply, "You thought that was scary? I let my children watch that. You
Yeah.
must have an awfully small penis to be scared by a movie like this."
I show this movie at my church group.
Yeah, we laughed. We thought it was funny. It's the horror. As a professional horror writing person, let me tell you, horror depends entirely on your personality, your sensibilities, your taboos, your traumas, the things in your life. Okay, there are things that scare you
100%,
that do not scare me. You know, some people are scared of bugs, some people are scared of ghosts. This movie does a lot of, in my opinion, genius things that violate rules of horror that you did not even know were rules until you saw them violated. And it is extremely upsetting, but contains virtually no gore. There are hardly any on-screen deaths. There's a little bit of blood, but it is not shocking in the way that you think it's going to be. It actually, nothing we can say in this episode can fully prepare you for what is upsetting about this movie, because on the surface, it would appear to be almost PG-13.
Yes.
Right. It's not like a I Spit on Your Grave or Texas Chainsaw. It's not that kind of shocking.
I do want to say that there are two versions of this movie.
Both directed by the same guy.
Yes. Michael Haneke, I believe.
Yeah.
He originally, the first one, the one we're talking about, was made in 1997. But from what I can tell, it's identical, the 2007 remake, because he originally wanted this to take place in America, this movie. Mm-hmm. So, having not watched the remake might be a more realized version of this film.
Well, let me explain. The situation was the director, this movie was made in Austria and it's filmed in German. He made it for American audiences because it is supposed to be a commentary on like American and Hollywood attitudes toward violence and things like that. But he's like, after he made it, since the film was in German with subtitles, he realized like it's not reaching anyone. If it was an
Americans are not going to watch a movie that they have to read.
Yeah, it's an art house thing. So an American producer reached out to him and said, "Let's make it again for American audiences with an English-speaking cast, American cast, and it stars Tim Roth and
Naomi Watts.
Naomi Watts. And that one came out 10 years later, and I don't know that it was any kind of a big hit at all, but it's the same director. It is shot for shot, line for line, exact. But my favorite horror movie is the original, not because I'm some movie snob where it's like it's got to be in the original German. It is because, for me personally, the moment you see famous actor faces in a movie like this, it takes me out of it a little bit.
You see, it's a weird feeling of comfort, even if the actor or actress is not necessarily in like a safe position. Like you immediately feel like, oh, it's Naomi Watts, so I know this isn't real.
Because there's that level of like meta commentary of, wow, I can't believe Tim Roth agreed to be in this movie. Like I can't quite detach myself. And so for me, it is much, much scarier seeing the original film where all of these faces are totally unknown to me. And the fact that they're speaking German, there's like a layer of kind of, it's like an alien nature to it, which might be partially due to racism. I don't know. But either way, if I was trying to, when I say this is the scariest movie you've ever seen, in my opinion, I'm talking about the German one, the one that was filmed in Austria.
Yeah, I can see what you're talking about with, I think part of the point of what this director's trying to make, it does lend itself to it being famous people. In fact, like, I think I would have liked it if he chose like people like Harrison Ford, people who like typically are heroic in movies for this. But shit. Oh yeah, I was gonna say the director also says he doesn't think it's a horror movie, which is very interesting. He doesn't intend it to be a horror movie. I know why this scares you, Jason. I know why this movie is scary.
Yeah, I sort of like when Ari Aster was saying that about like Hereditary. Oh, it's not a horror movie; it's a family drama. Like when directors make a movie that is obviously a horror movie and say this isn't a horror movie, they can get right the fuck out of my face with that.
Sure.
Well, and from my point of view, I don't. Like, genre labels don't mean anything to me. And again, I realize that's the second thing that has made me sound like the most pretentious film person in the world. But I get asked that a lot about books, where it's like, well, how would you classify this? Is it like a sci-fi comedy or something? It's like, you're asking me like what tags Amazon should put on it or what shelf Barnes & Noble should put it on. That feels like their decision. When I'm writing it, I don't sit down and say, you know what, I want to break into the cyberpunk genre. Like, that's not how I work. Now, that's how maybe a fan would think of it. But in terms of whether or not he considers this to be horror, I just don't care. It is the scariest movie I know of. But reading interviews with this director will not make you want to watch his movies more.
No, he's a real son of a bitch.
Well, I get where he's coming from with a lot of what he says. I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but I think it's important to listen to him.
Oh, and the whole reason I brought this is I think there's a lot to be discussed. About what it's trying to say with the point, because it's true. I'm using this as entertainment because I find it really scary, but from his point of view, he would be mad at me for doing that. Like, he would be mad at me coming on the show saying it's a scary movie, because his whole thing is like, well, if you like this movie, it means you're a dick. Right.
Well, for people who haven't watched it, Jason, you want to describe what this movie is actually about?
Sure. It's, there's a family, and they are kind of an upper class family. It's a father, his wife named George and Anna, or Anna, however they would say it in the movie. Their young son, Georgie, and their dog, and they go to their vacation home in Austria. It's this beautiful lakeside place with like other rich people vacation homes. And while they're there, a couple of college age guys show up, and they're wearing like, I guess, tennis clothes, like a white T-shirt and
they're like
shorts or golf outfits or something like that.
Yeah. Real country club outfits.
And they show up and just very subtly start imposing themselves on the family in obnoxious ways. Like, one guy keeps asking, the two guys are named Peter and Paul. And Paul is kind of like, seems to be in charge, and Peter is like his sidekick, I guess. And they keep, for instance, they ask to borrow some eggs and then intentionally drop them and then ask to borrow another egg. And they just keep doing it. And you start to get a sense that there's something off about these guys, and they keep like escalating and torturing this family until it goes places you didn't know a movie is not supposed to go until you saw a movie do it. Because
Yeah.
the way I describe it, it's like, well, a couple of psychopaths like hold this family hostage for an entire day and basically come up with a series of sadistic games or toy with them or whatever. That doesn't get at it, because there you can imagine what the ending of that movie would look like, which is that one of the members of the family, probably a teenage daughter, she breaks free and kills the captors, and then she gets away, and either you do a movie ending thing where she successfully gets away, or if you are a dark movie director, then she thinks she's gotten away, but then she dies at the end, and then that's like the final scare, is that one of the guys was still alive. This movie does not do any of that.
No, it's kind of an anti-movie.
It really is.
It is a movie that seems to hate its audience, and it seems to be mad at you for watching it.
It's part of the point of the movie is the movie takes you hostage, like the audience.
Yes.
They break the fourth wall a lot, or at least
Paul does.
one of
He's
them.
the only
Paul.
one that does.
Yeah. Talks directly to us. Talks about how he's in a movie. At
one point, literally rewinds the movie to undo something he doesn't like.
Yes. He has complete control. So you realize pretty quickly that you're sort of at the mercy of this guy, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea of the film is to make you feel helpless. Is to make you feel, because like normally I don't like movies. I've talked about this before. Movies where it's a character's trapped in the house and they have to escape. You constantly think of smarter things for that character to be doing. Mm-hmm. Because they're fighting the screenwriter. That's literally what's happening in this movie. Is the movie is the point of the movie is these people can't escape no matter what they do. Even if they do the right thing, the film will rewind itself and change. Because again, you're helpless. You're completely helpless watching the movie.
Yeah,
and you don't want what's going to happen to these people to happen to these people.
Yeah, this movie is just punishing you for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, but it's from my end, it's beautifully put together, because like the initial act of violence is just which I can't remember which one. I think it's Paul just hits the husband in the leg with a golf club.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and like breaks his kneecap or something, which is an injury that in most movies, like 3 scenes later, you've just shrugged off. I mean, in most American movies, you can get shot and still participate in a kung fu fight, a couple of scenes later.
Right.
In this movie, that injury, as in real life, since it's untreated, just keeps getting worse, because it swells up and it locks up, and you can't. It gets inflamed.
He's bleeding all over the place. It's a serious problem.
From that point on, he's useless, like he can't do anything. And so everything you expect to happen, like all of the acts of heroism, kind of just, you're like, well, gosh, how are they going to get out of this? And over again, the movie's like, oh, they're not. These are just average people. They're going to try, just pure survival instinct. They're going to try a couple of things, but in real life, people just get killed all the time. And so the director, I said that you wouldn't like this director if you watched interviews with him. He is very much somebody, his whole thing is that Hollywood movies glorify violence even when the movie is about, like he complains that Schindler's List glorifies scenes in the, because
right.
it's taking the violence and making entertainment out of it. And no matter if the movie supposedly has some message against violence, is still filming it and staging it in what he says is a very pornographic way. Like it's intended to look cool. If you've seen it on Twitter, there's a very funny video.
It's pretty incredible, yeah.
Where he's talking about Schindler's List and why he doesn't believe it's moral, and the camera pans over to reveal that he's talking in a room with Judd Apatow and fucking John Krasinski. And they look so in over their heads.
Well, because this director doesn't really speak English. He said all that in German.
Yeah.
It's such a good video.
I don't know. I would love to know what that appearance was, what they thought they were doing there, but...
I watched the full video. You can watch the full video.
Why would that guy was in the same room with Judd Apatow and John Krasinski?
John Krasinski gives an okay answer at the end, and Judd Apatow says nothing. And it's some Hollywood Reporter thing where I don't know. I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know why they're there exactly. I think it's just some like round table situation. The funniest thing is under John Krasinski's name, the thing they credit him for is the movie Promised Land for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Did he direct that?
I don't think so. I think he's in it.
I would.
No, Gus Van Sant directed that.
I would personally prefer, like, the message of his whole thing about how movie violence corrupts people. I prefer to leave that toward the end because it's, if the listeners have not watched this movie yet, I'd like to go through.
Sure.
Because we have to get this out of the way now, partially because that's the director's stated purpose of making the movie. Is his whole thing is, I want you. The whole thing is, normally in movie violence, you don't feel bad about it because it doesn't affect you. I wanted to do violence that affects you, like you feel the pain of what's happening here, and I think he did that.
He sure did
in a few ways. So, for example, like after the main bad guy disables the husband with the golf club, the next thing that happens is they realize their dog is missing. And Paul starts playing this game with them, like, go find the dog.
Hot and cold,
like, yeah. You're getting warmer, you're getting colder. And then you see in the distance, like, the mother opens up the car and the dog's dead body spills out onto the ground. And the best moment in the movie, one of my favorite moments in any movie, is for the first time, Paul is in the foreground and he just turns and looks at you, the viewer.
And he winks.
Smirks.
Yeah,
he like has this
when
smirking, like
yeah.
Can you believe this idiot? Like, haha. And it's like, because up to that point, nobody has broken the fourth wall. That's the first time he's turned and looked at you and says, oh yeah, you're, without saying anything, but his expression is amazing. That's one reason why I would worry about watching the remake, because I don't know how many actors could nail that the way he does. Because it's the most chilling thing I've seen in a long time. And again, I'm someone who watches like slasher movies. Like, I'll just put them on. Like, you're not going to find one I haven't seen. I'm a horror guy. I will just throw them up there. If I watch like some guy being torn limb from limb and his face is ripped off, my only thought is, oh, their makeup is great. Like, that's a great makeup effect. They must have used some CGI and some latex. Like, that's really cool. But I'm never like, oh my gosh, that guy's face got ripped off. But that moment, which again, up to that point, all this happened is the guy got hit in the leg with a golf club and a dog has died. But what that portends, and then realize what kind of movie you're watching at that moment, is just, it's amazing.
It's also the way the scene is shot, which makes me, I need to watch the remake now, specifically for the cinematography, because the way this movie is shot, and I want to get into like specifics later, but like a lot of very wide shots on a tripod, slow pans covering the entire scene, long takes, not anything fancy, not like, oh, look at it, we did it all in one take kind of shot. No, it's just shot for efficiency almost, but it's showing something horrifying slowly unfold, or something horrifying already having happened.
Right. And
the dog shot is the same way, where it's a slow pan. And she's looking around, and then he just happens to be in the foreground because I think he either steps into the shot.
He steps into the shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and suddenly it changes the composure of the shot, and then the dog rolls out and him turning and winking. It's just like, oh Jesus.
Yeah, he winks before she opens the door. But
okay, yeah,
it's like when she starts to walk towards the Range Rovers when he turns the camera. Like
it's very like old 70s.
It reminded
horror.
me of Halloween. In that the frames are all so big. Like there's just, like you said, it's every shot's like really wide, and it's like showing you stuff that's really ordinary, and I think it's the same intent as Halloween, where it's like, hey, here's this horrible thing invading this normal setting.
Right.
There's also no score.
Yeah, that helps.
At any point in the movie, there is no score. I didn't realize it until it was almost like 20 minutes before it was over. I was like, there hasn't been a score in a single scene in this film.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if there's anyone listening who has not watched this movie and you would like to experience it, now would be a good time to pause the show.
Yes.
And go, because it's Tom and David, they're not going to lose like ad revenue if you pause the show right now and go watch it, right? Like this is a Patreon driven operation. So you're not like our conversation about it will actually mean more to you if you pause and go watch it. Because we're going to get into spoilers that actually will ruin the effect of the movie if you know what's coming.
Yes.
That obviously we're going to discuss it, because that would be, you can't fill an entire podcast just hinting at things. So yes, please. And this is probably your final warning, because the issue about not having a score, as key characters that you didn't think could die, they are not granted like the heroic emotional score or editing or anything else. So after the dog has been killed, you've got 3 characters left. Again, husband, wife, and their young boy. And at one point, the young boy escapes and gets to a neighbor's house, which in many movies like this is part of the cat and mouse game where the survivors are trying to, because horror is normally actually one reason I like horror and like writing it. It is actually normally about the triumph of the human spirit over monsters. Usually the good guys either win, and then even if you do a Day of the Dead thing where they all die in the final shot or whatever, still they died after a heroic battle and escape, and they did everything they could. It's still heroic. It's just some horror movies still end with the bad guy being alive because they want to make sequels. Right. But here, the kid escapes, and for some reason, I can't remember, he loses like his pants, or he's wearing like overalls, or
he
takes them off.
Yeah, he takes them off because he's making wet footprints because he went through the lake.
Yeah, and so it's like this kid now just in like a t-shirt with no pants on, which makes him seem like more vulnerable or whatever. And he finds a shotgun and aims it at Paul, and it doesn't go off. It's unloaded, or it's got the safety on or something.
I think it's not loaded because he tells him to cock it and he pulls the trigger and the hammer goes for it, and nothing happens. And then later on, Paul hands Peter 2 cartridges. He's like, "Here, the kid help us out."
Yeah, he hauls the kid right back to the house where he's holding everybody hostage, and now they have a loaded shotgun. And at one point, and they're on the TV, they're like watching a race or something, and it's just playing in the background. And at one point, Paul gets up to go to the kitchen to make a sandwich. The camera.
This is my favorite part. Go on. Sorry.
The camera. It's one of the best sequences in the history of horror cinema.
I think so. Yeah.
The camera follows him into the kitchen as he casually gets meat and cheese and stuff out of the fridge to make a sandwich, and then you hear a shotgun go off in the other room, and the parents screaming, and then he walks in there, and the kid has been killed, and his blood is splattered on this TV.
Some key stuff. He continues to make the sandwich.
He continues to make the sandwich, and then he walks off screen, and it holds on the kitchen, and you can hear him arguing with Peter. It still doesn't cut to the living room. He's arguing. It's like, "Well, you shot one of them. Why'd you do that?" He's like, "Well, he was trying to run away." He's like, "Well, now we can't do anything with the other 2. We got to leave now." So you hear him argue and leave before it even cuts back to the living room. And then when it cuts back to the living room, it's just the mom sitting there hunched over, stunned, and the kid's got his head blown off, and there's blood all over the TV, and the race is still playing. And she just sits there motionlessly for it felt like an eternity.
The camera
before she actually moves.
Holds that shot forever.
Yeah.
There's no score. There's no nothing. It is a mother and a father in a room with the corpse of their dead child, with this TV still playing the stupid race, and they're both bound. And she eventually gets up and tries to, and hobbles over there. Manages to turn the TV off. But you just sit there, and you're not granted the escape of cutting to a different shot or cutting to close-ups or anything. You're just sitting there for a very long time.
The race, I thought, was really amazing, because the way they set that up is they show him channel surfing. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like this window to the normal world in that shot, because the mother's in the shot where he's channel surfing, and she's tied up, and she looks horrible. And that's before setting it all up. And he gets to the race, and you don't think anything of it. But when he starts going into the kitchen, and when you realize what's happening, the sound of the cars is kind of horrifying. It's a very abrasive sound.
Yeah.
It doesn't cut out. It doesn't stop. It's just this droning machine sound. And so it actually like serves as horror music for the sequence, which I thought was really smart. It was really cool.
Yes. It's a grating. It's like grating engine noises and all of that. Yeah.
There's also, we talk about these wide shots. There's one scene that doesn't do the wide shot that I thought was interesting. And that's when, just backing up a little bit, before they kill the kid, they make the mother strip in front of them.
Yeah. With a pillowcase over the kid's head.
They put a pillowcase over and they act like it's a game. They're guessing if she has any belly fat or something like that. And the way they shoot it is, if this was any other horror movie, a producer would be like, well, it's an opportunity to see someone naked, a naked woman. You know, let's do it. Not even like bothering with the fact that it's a horrifying scenario that they're making this woman strip. And instead, the director shoots only their faces. And it makes it so uncomfortable and so disturbing as they just close-ups of everybody's face as she's doing this. It's really well done. Because, again, it's the director making the audience feel what they're feeling in such a good way. And never letting up on that.
And
never looking away.
To draw a contrast with a movie that I talk about a lot that is sort of in the same genre but doesn't really execute it quite as well, Death Wish 3.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
When
classic Death Wish.
Like the key moment when the crime. I wrote an entire article about this for Sean Baby's site, but this is the one where the major plot point where things turn around is Charles Bronson orders a larger gun through the mail.
Sure.
And that solves their crime problem because he now has a larger gun than what the bad guys do.
That he immediately drops, if I remember correctly. Anyway.
Well, he upgrades to like a machine gun in the third act,
and then finally a bazooka.
Yeah, finally a bazooka, as by the rules of screenwriting, like obviously. But anyway, like the key moment in that movie is supposed to be like the low point for the heroes is they rape and murder it's the wife of one of his Charles Bronson's
his neighbors,
allies, or whatever. And they're just so sure to give you like a nice shot of her breasts, of her bare breasts as she's being attacked and then eventually killed. She dies in a hospital later. But, they cast a woman with perfect breasts and then made sure to catch those because in the 80s, like an action movie about how crime is out of control, if you didn't have that scene, the audience would just riot. Like, you got it.
Right.
And then it's just like this nod and a wink to the audience. It's like, hey, you're not enjoying this, are you? Because this is a terrible crime we're watching here. Yeah, you're not. None of us are. This isn't salacious at all. This is, of course, we're not. It's like, okay. I mean, you could have had it be an old woman getting attacked. You could have done a lot of things different, but we all know what's going on here. So, and see, this is the thing. Normally, if somebody makes a movie where their entire mission is to show you that movies are actually bad, that's usually a terrible movie. This guy accidentally made an incredibly effective piece of horror cinema when his entire mission was to yell at you for enjoying this kind of thing. But just showing her face as she has to take off her clothes in front of her family and in front of these armed men, and only showing her face and denying us seeing anything else, makes it so much scarier and so much worse because you're just reading every emotion on her face. Like you're just reading what she's going through. And I don't know. I don't want to say he accidentally made a great horror movie because again, this is all very purposeful. It's just that if he heard us talking about how, well, this is better than the other horror movies I watched that week, I think he would hate that because it's like, no, this is supposed to be, it would be like, saying that Natural Born Killers is a great action movie. It's like Oliver Stone be like, no,
right.
This is to teach you that violence is wrong.
I do think he wants us to feel horrified.
Yes.
And in that sense, he is like, I think it's just real pretentious being like, I don't think this is a horror movie. It's like, well, you set out to make a movie that would disturb us. I think that's part of the point, right? Is making us feel it, like being like, look at her face. You can't look away. You have to look at her face while this is happening. He knows that we're going to feel absolute horror at that. Unless we're maniacs.
Yeah, some kind of goblin.
There's a quote from him, and I know we'll get into this more later, but he had an essay about kind of talking about showing violence, and he actually calls out Death Wish, which is funny. But he said the question on the topic of violence is not how do I show violence, but rather how do I show the viewer his own position vis-a-vis violence and its portrayal. So how to make someone recognize what they're doing, what he's doing, and how to make the viewer recognize what they're feeling about it, I guess. And so I thought that was very interesting with a scene like this, because they're showing you, if you're used to stuff like Death Wish and you're watching a movie like this, do you get disappointed they don't show her naked? Are you like, they didn't show it, because that says a lot about you. Him putting it straight on her face, and how you feel about that is, I think, what he wanted to achieve. And boy, he does a good job at it in this.
For people in the listenership who have not seen the Death Wish movies, because you may think it's weird that we keep referring to it. The story, very briefly, the story behind Death Wish is Death Wish was a novel from the mid-'70s, which America was in just an absolute crime hellscape at that time due to a number of factors. But the cities and had become unlivable in many cases. Like the thing that Donald Trump pretends is going on now was actually happening in the 70s when people wouldn't ride the subway because there's such a high chance you would be attacked. So, but the guy wrote a novel that was a cautionary tale about taking vengeance, because it was about this guy who is an architect, and his wife gets killed in a violent crime. And so he goes on he becomes a vigilante. But the novel is basically a horror novel because it's about how this breaks him. And then by the end of the book, he's just killing teenagers for no reason. He kills a group of kids who are just throwing rocks at a school bus or something like that. And the point of the book is you have a death wish. You embark on this path. It's that thing that you just go ahead and dig 2 graves, because it's not, this is not how it works. You are breaking the law yourself. So then they made it into a movie. And Hollywood, of course, had some notes about that. And the movie, America is in the middle of this, they're watching the news every night and crime's out of control. And here's this movie about this middle-aged white guy who is able to defeat crime by being better at guns.
Yeah.
It's that kicks ass. And so they wound up making 5 Death Wish movies. Across the 5 movies, Charles Bronson would kill 115 people. Would be the most prolific serial killer in world history. It wouldn't even be close. In the climax of Death Wish 3, for example, when he gets that machine gun, I counted he killed 44 people. Which would be the largest mass shooting in history prior to the Las Vegas shooting. The idea that there's any neighborhood in New York where you could shoot 44 people and nobody would notice is ludicrous. And the news would not have it hero kills 44 gangsters. It would just be mass shooting in downtown New York or whatever city they did. It may have been Chicago. I don't know. It doesn't matter because they probably didn't shoot it there anyway. So these movies, and the author actually wrote a sequel Death Wish book that was emphasized even harder that acts of vigilantism is this fantasy for middle-aged white assholes. And that book was completely ignored. Meanwhile, they just cranked out one blockbuster Death Wish movie after another, where Charles Bronson is now, he has flamethrowers and rocket launchers, and it's just this. It gets more and more absurd, and whatever message they had about violence being bad just gets totally lost for the reason this guy talks about. Because the moment Charles Bronson, big star in the 70s, charismatic, for the era, was a prototypical tough guy, and even though he's playing an architect, that doesn't matter. The moment he's gotten a gun in his hands, he's a superhero, because that's the American fantasy, is that once you've got the gun, You can do anything, and you can beat the bad guys, and that's a good guy with a gun will solve everything.
The kid, just real quick.
Sure.
Just because it directly relates to that point, the kid bringing the gun to the house to try to fight the bad guys ends up getting 2 of them killed in this movie, which is like the statistic of gun ownership. Like if you have a gun in the house, you're more likely to be shot with your own gun, either on purpose or by accident.
Because adding the gun to the mix does not make the situation better for them.
No.
Yeah. If you're not trained in using a gun, the bad guy has the advantage because that person probably does have experience using a gun, or at least they're more willing, less likely to hesitate, whatever. But it plays directly into the fantasy.
The way the director called out Death Wish, which I think is one of the best points he makes in his essay, is he talks about how there's several ways that movies make violence acceptable, and the one that always bothers me, because this isn't just used for violence, is putting the characters in a situation where you're like, well, what else is there to do? Like, that's what Death Wish is, right? It's like, well, you can't reason with these people, so you have to shoot them. It's creating an imaginary situation in which violence is the only solution, which I think movies have a big problem with for other things. I think like the Avengers films do that thing where they're like, should they have ultimate power? It's kind of fascist for like these few people to have all this power. We should talk about it.
Right,
and then they're like, oh, here comes Thanos. Never mind.
Like Captain America's famous "No, you move" speech is given in response to the government wanting to have oversight. Like them needing to have to answer to somebody is what he gives that speech in relation to.
Right, and I've made this comparison before, much like the Death Wish book versus the movie. I feel like there's the same relationship to the movie Team America and the Avengers, where Team America was like, let's do a comedy about a bunch of people in high-tech gear going around the country kind of being assholes, like doing whatever they want. And then Avengers comes along, they're like, okay, that, but unironic.
Right. We're going to unironically have Charles Bronson shoot a man in the chest with a bazooka.
Exactly. It's let's miss the point. It's how they're going to remake Starship Troopers, but like the book, which apparently was like very fashy from what I've heard.
The movie is too.
The movie is satire on that.
Yeah.
As opposed to the book was apparently
not
earnest.
No.
So it's that sort of thing where like, I think we love to justify things in movies, because you'll hear people say that when you point out like the Avengers have too much power, people are like, yeah, but Thanos, and it's like, yeah, but the writers made up Thanos.
Right, they brought Thanos here. Like, what happens when like Iron Man gets pissed off because, I don't know, his stocks go down? I don't know.
Right.
Or he's just drunk.
Right, yeah. He's just drunk flying around in his suit.
Again, they touch on these ideas, but they never answer them because they're like, oh, here comes the bad guy. Never mind. So they're aware of it, but they don't have a good answer, because the good answer is, no, we really shouldn't have these people. And it's not a good thing.
The book Starship Troopers is actually also specifically about that, because it's written in a way that I kind of don't mind science fiction where it's set up as a thought experiment. And the whole concept of Starship Troopers is, well, all of the things you think of as bad in terms of, like forcing people into the military, conscripting people, all these really tight controls that kind of make a society militaristic. What if it was species versus species and only one of you can survive? And so it's presented as kind of, now, obviously, again, the entire point we're making is that ultimately he stacks the deck, because he paints a scenario where only fascism could save us, or at least only like the things we think of as like personal freedoms. It's like, no, you can't go off and be an artist. You have to join the military because we need every single able-bodied person to fight the bugs. And like, no, you can't be a pacifist because it's species versus species. Like your pacifism will work right up until the final bug rips your throat out. We have to fight. And so in terms of like it's science fiction in the era, I think it kind of came out during like there's an anti-war movement in America, and it's kind of maybe a little bit of a rebuttal to that. But if you say, okay, well, but that's not the situation we had with Vietnam. Like when they said it's us versus communism, that was a lie. Like Vietnam,
right.
like the idea that we needed to sacrifice that much and kill 2 million people for what was going on there, only to leave and the situation's exactly the same when we left. Like you're trying to claim it's species, versus species when it's not, and that's the whole thing. Is you're intentionally arranging a scenario where killing everyone you see is the only answer.
Right.
And in fact, the first movie we discussed, Dragged Across Concrete, our whole criticism against that was the same. Where in the universe of the movie, it kind of makes sense for Mel Gibson to be a racist. It's like, okay, but you wrote all that.
Yeah.
Right. It's someone playing with action figures. They're setting it all up.
Yeah, and in this movie, he does that. Like he makes Peter and Paul these impossibly evil people, and you hate them and you want them to die, but he denies giving the audience that expected result.
The movie version that I like for violence, for justifying violence, I just have to bring this up because it's I've brought it up several times. It's the funniest fucking moment in a movie is Murder at 1600, where it's the trope that's in all these movies where the good guy's like the bad guy is defeated, right? And he's going to get arrested. And the good guy's like, I won't shoot you. And then the bad guy brings out a gun, and they're like, well, gotta shoot him. Because the audience wants the violence. They want the bad guy to die, so they have to force the hand. And the funniest one is in Murder at 1600, where Alan Alda, who's like a politician, he's like a senator. Or he's like the Speaker of the House or something. He turns out to be the bad guy, and at the last minute grabs a Secret Service person's gun and points it at the president. And I think the Secret Service or Wesley Snipes or whoever has to just gun down Alan Alda playing a politician. And it's like, why? He would never do that. He's going to go to a white collar prison and be there for a couple years at best. And no, he acts like he's like every other bad guy and pulls out a gun. It's the funniest fucking
like
thing.
He had an ankle holster or something.
Yeah. It's the funniest thing to see them be like, he's got a gun, and just tear into Alan Alda. Yeah, we should probably focus back on the movie.
Yeah.
But
anyway, so after the child is killed, there's a moment where you guys mentioned like the two, Peter and Paul, they leave. And it's implied that they've decided to move on, and you see the husband and wife like have to, you fully see them dealing with like the trauma of seeing their child get killed, but now they have to try to do something to like help themselves, because here's the other rule that this movie violates over and over again, which is that the good guys are just kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
And so, she tries to go get help. He tries to use the phone to call someone, but it's gotten wet. Isn't that what it is?
They knock it into the sink.
Peter drops it into the sink during the whole egg breaking charade.
So,
and before they do the phone, she tries to physically get him out of the room, and that's grueling as well because he can barely move.
Yeah, he can't walk.
Because his leg, the leg that was injured by the golf club, it just keeps getting worse, which again, that's how it works. Your body does not heal in the course of 3 scenes. It just freezes up and it gets swollen, and you can't use the leg. And it's so infuriating to watch because she's like trying to help him out of there, and they're like hobbling along an inch at a time, and the camera just holds on them, and they look pathetic. There's nothing heroic about it because in real life, heroism doesn't let you walk on a broken leg. It just doesn't. A human body is actually really easy to incapacitate.
Every moment of violence in this movie, again, this is by design and totally to his point. It's inglorious and it's undignified.
Yeah.
Yeah. And often off screen, like you didn't even get to see the child get killed. Like it's not, you don't get the dramatic.
I don't
music
think you don't see George get killed either. They shoot him. Like the camera's on him. The camera's on Paul as he points the gun down and shoots George, but you never see it, and you don't see his dead body.
Yeah. So anyway, they execute their plan to try to get to safety or get help, and the phone is wet, so he has to like pull the battery out of the phone, and then he like tries to like dry it with a blow dryer or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's very pathetic.
You just see him sitting there at a table trying to dry off his phone with a blow dryer, and that's like their grand plan to try to get help. And the wife, because she can walk, tries to go somewhere, and then the killers wind up abducting her and taking her back to the house, and that's where there's a sequence where the thing with rewinding the movie, is that before or after the husband George is killed?
That's before.
Okay.
Because he's doing the game where he wants her to say a prayer in reverse, and she grabs the gun and shoots Peter, and then Paul freaks out, grabs the remote, rewinds it, has her do the prayer again, but this time when she goes for the gun, he grabs it and he says, okay, you broke the rules and you lost, so now I'm just going to kill George, and then he shoots George.
Yeah, he actually, and this is, again, up to this point, there's been no hint that they had this ability.
Right. I mean, he's talked to the camera a few times, but we didn't.
He mentioned, I thought he complained when they kill the kid, like that it ruins the tension.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, because the kid's the one, the whole thing is, how are they going to protect the kid? You know, like the kid's going to get away. Surely the kid will be the one who gets away. And then the kid gets his head blown off before the parents. And it's like, whoa, that's the opposite of how this is supposed to go. And I think he mentions also that when they leave, it's to also give them a chance.
Yeah, he said it wouldn't be dramatic if they didn't have a chance.
Right. So he's aware of like the structure of a film as well.
Yeah, it's like Jason was saying earlier, he knows he's in a movie.
Yeah.
But he's the only one.
He's the only one, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the whole point is that like they stage this heroic moment, which you are sure is coming. Like the whole movie, you're waiting for someone to like be heroic and start the escape that you're sure is coming. Like you've seen this movie before, and so she finally works up her courage and snatches, like it does the traditional thing where it shows the gun and it shows where she can get to it, and it shows her, and it's like the language of cinema, like setting up what's about to happen. And she grabs it and she kills one of the bad guys. It's like this moment of catharsis. And then Paul, in a rage, just starts hunting around for the remote and finally finds it and then just rewinds time by a minute. And does it again in this time. And again, if it's the hero doing something, we allow all sort of deus ex machina to, because ultimately it's in service of them getting away and whatever needs to come to help them escape or whatever. It's all ultimately, we kind of understand. That's how it works in storytelling. Sometimes the heroes, you have to make it look like the odds are overwhelmingly against the heroes, and then something unlikely has to happen, and that's just how it works. The idea that the bad guys are the only ones with access to break the rules of the universe in order to succeed. Again, if you haven't watched the movie, if you know it's coming, it's going to ruin it. But it is so out of left field.
Yeah. And it's such a...
And it's so hopeless because it's in that moment you realize, oh, nothing's going to work.
Yeah, they can't do anything. Yeah, that's when it becomes incredibly clear. Like, because you finally got this moment. Oh yeah, finally! Like she blows Peter away, but then he just takes it back, and like that is then, like the ultimate moment where you're like, oh, there's nothing she can possibly do to get away.
And then kills the father in a very anticlimactic act. Again, there's no dignity or no drama, no anything given to his death. He's just killed basically off screen. It's incidental. Then finally it culminates, and then she's still tied up, and they take her out on a sailboat that's parked there. And they do the thing again, where this time they show they've left a knife laying there where she can almost get to it. And she starts like getting the hand free to get to the knife. And then Peter, I think, just takes a knife and just throws it into the water.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
they do a whole
they
thing.
Spot it immediately.
Yeah.
They set it up early in the movie, and you're like, oh, that knife's gonna matter, and it's like, no,
actually, none of this matters.
And then they're like, okay, because they had told them earlier they were going to kill them by 9 a.m. and they looked at the time and was like, it's like 8 o'clock. Let's go ahead, and they just shove her off in the water, and she plunges into the water, and the camera doesn't even show her going in. She just falls out of frame, and they just go and sail on to the next victim, and that's it. That's your movie.
Yep. It's so anticlimactic.
Even the ending holds
the
you
violence.
hostage.
Yeah.
Because the ending is he walks over to this. They sail over to this other couple's house that you saw earlier in the film, and he knocks on the door asking for eggs again, and she lets him in, and he looks straight down the barrel of the camera and smiles again, and it freezes on his face and plays this metal song that it played in the beginning for like 3 minutes, it feels like.
Yeah.
And you can't like turn it off because you're like, well, maybe it's not over yet, I don't know. So you're just sitting there held captive by him for another minute or two at the end of the film.
Yep.
And I think at the beginning of the movie, it's implied they had just come from maybe another house where they had, or something.
They spot them in the backyard of their neighbor's house.
Yeah.
So the implication is that they've killed their neighbors the previous day.
Yeah, he sees the bodies later. The kid
okay.
does.
I didn't realize that.
I missed that, yeah.
Yeah, he sees the body, or he sees someone's legs, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
But the implication is they're just going along house to house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they do the same thing where the neighbors show up on the boat. She has to act like everything's all right. Just like they did when they drove by the neighbors.
Right, because they're out in the front yard with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's oh man.
It's a whole
It's
ass
brutal.
thing. Yeah, this movie hates you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the point. It's the point.
Yeah, it's executed perfectly in what its intended purpose was.
It hates you, or it dares you to be a sadist, because he looks at you like he's Bugs Bunny. This character, he looks at the camera and he's like, "Oh yeah, you want them to live, don't you? Don't you?" And then you realize they have all the control. You have to face the realization that they're the main characters.
Yeah,
they're the protagonists, and that's not fun.
And that they're breaking a contract with the viewer that you didn't know you had previously signed. Like all of these rules that they keep breaking, like the fact that the villains are not physically imposing at all. They're just a couple of dudes. They're just a couple of college kids, look like they play tennis or something like that. There's no like iconic, weapon or anything like that.
They don't even have any weapons when they come over. For most of the movie, they just have the golf club. One thing that we're talking about, rules you didn't really know existed, that this movie kind of puts right out in the center, is Paul, who is the one, the main bad guy. He's the one who breaks the fourth wall. He's the one who does all the smirking and winking and Bugs Bunny stuff. Normally, I feel like in an American version of this movie, one made by like an American filmmaker, or in like a more traditional Hollywood movie, Paul would be charming, right? He'd be like Heath Ledger's Joker, where you'd be like entertained by watching him.
Right.
And he is not that. Like, you hate these characters. They're not appealing in any way. They're obnoxious. They're evil. They're just, everything about them is repellent.
They also set up a hint at redemption, because he keeps making fun of his friend for being overweight. He keeps calling him
and for being like
fatty or something.
He keeps calling him Tubby, and he tells this elaborate story about like how he's this huge fuck up, and all of his brothers and sisters are drug addicts.
He keeps being like, "Don't call me that." And if it was any other film, that would set up a rift between them that the main characters could use. Not in this.
Not in this movie.
Yeah. No.
And those are more like the thing with giving you like Chekhov's guns that don't pay off later. That's one of the things that it's just so embedded in the language of cinema that you didn't realize that. Yeah, it's like if you're used to sleeping in a room that always has some sort of white noise, like a fan, and suddenly you try to sleep in a silent room and you can't stand it. It's not kind of the same thing here. There are a lot of these rules of filmmaking that you didn't really know you depended on until someone takes them away.
Yeah.
And the thing like you would expect the dog to survive, or that, if the dog dies, it dies in some heroic fashion, or they show it or something like that. I've definitely seen horror movies where they like leave a bloody dog on the doorstep or something like that.
Like the 1996 Mark Wahlberg film Fear, where they stick the dog's head through the dog door, and it's
right.
That classic film.
Classic film Fear with Mark Wahlberg, yeah.
This
podcast has the best like instant references to it's like, it's just like in
this other movie you've never seen or heard of.
Yeah. Well, another movie that this reminded me of that people might have seen and heard of is Nocturnal Animals, because the home invasion reminded me. It feels like Nocturnal Animals had a little inspiration from this, because Nocturnal Animals, without spoiling it, is a very upsetting film, and it has a scene where a situation that feels mundane slowly gets more and more threatening and escalates to something that you wouldn't think would happen. And that's sort of how they do the home invasion, which again is kind of subverting your expectations. Is whenever a movie does this, they break in, they grab them, they tie them up.
Or it's like what is The Purge, where like the Paul character would show up in a mask and give this eloquent speech. It's like, no, they just kind of weirdly come in there and slowly start imposing themselves.
Right, to the point where before you know it, they're tied up.
Yeah.
They're hostage. But it starts just being an argument about eggs. And obviously they've planned it, but they make it so knowing movies, I knew what they were up to, but they do this thing where you're not quite sure what's happening at first.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they're gaslighting them.
They are.
Like he slaps him, and so he breaks his knee, and then he's like, "You shouldn't have. Why did you slap me?" And he makes it, and then he's like, "Here, let me help you out with your knee." Like they act like they continue to act like they're innocent, or they're just normal neighbor people.
Yeah.
Until before they know it, they're held hostage.
American horror movies these days, like the ones they're making in 2020. Usually they now have to open with some sort of, like, the opening scene has a monster, and then they cut to the family moving into the house 20 years later, just to let you know, don't worry, we're getting to the scares. They'll be here, but because they figure that if it's just they just show a family moving into a creepy house, they're afraid we'll like storm out of the theater. Like we didn't come to watch a movie about a family moving into a house. We came here to watch.
It's the same people who would have rioted in the 80s if there wasn't nudity in every crime movie.
Right. It's like, we came here to see ghosts. So that now they have to have like a flashback to when the witch cursed the house or whatever. And then we cut to the white family moving in and slowly.
It's like they all have to have cold opens now.
This movie not only doesn't have that, but they're not in any kind of a creepy neighborhood or home. It's not atmospheric. There's no rain. It's broad daylight. It's a beautiful day. There's nothing to hint to you what's happening. They don't hear on the radio about a string of mysterious deaths. Like everything that you're forced to do now, the movie, like I can imagine teenagers talking about how boring this movie is, or how boring the opening movie is. Like, well, nothing happens.
He does do some of the structural work, because they see the neighbors setting up. They do something interesting in the beginning credits, which is, of course, they're listening to classical music. And then when we only see the car shot from afar, like almost in a voyeuristic way, kind of like The Shining, actually. And then we only see their hands. And they're listening to classical music, and then the moment it cuts to their faces, I think we get the title there, and it cuts to the weird metal music. So he immediately puts you at a sense of unease. You know the type of movie you're watching, but it's a slow roll from there.
But even then, like the title of the movie does not imply anything.
No, funny games.
If you stumbled across this in streaming or in a video store or something like that, I don't know how they marketed it in Germany or in Austria or Germany or whatever markets it all came out in, because it made the film festival rounds and all of that and was acclaimed. But I would be curious to know what the trailer to the American movie looked like for the 2007 version. Because there's sort of expectations with audiences now that I don't. Well, I mean, obviously, the movie didn't become a big hit, so they're right and I'm wrong. Like, for people who like this kind of thing.
Yeah,
this is interesting. When it screened at Cannes in 1997, 1/3 of the audience walked out before the.
I was gonna say my experience with this film, because I knew this film was. I knew the film was remade, and I didn't know the director had done the remake. And so all I knew about was my friend had saw the remake, and I asked him how it was, and he hated it. And he gave the rewinding the movie as an example of why he hated the film. And I didn't know what that meant. He hadn't told me enough, and I thought it was just like another one of those home invasion movies. But then realizing it was a remake and realizing the original is like a Criterion Collection film, it was like, okay, I bet my friend missed something here. And so, yeah, I think if you go into this expecting like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or like a film you would expect in 2008 when this came out, like a home invasion slasher, a Purge or something like that, you're going to be extremely disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't do any of the things that you want it to do. It doesn't. It's the idea again. It's like, oh, you want violence? Okay, here's the violence. You're not going to feel good about it, though. We're not going to let you feel good about it.
Yeah,
like another movie will let you feel good about it. We're not going to let you.
This movie doesn't really reward you for watching it.
Right. Well, I think that's the point, right? The director is, I don't want to reward you for watching violence. I want you to feel upset at violence. Because violence is upsetting.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Mission accomplished.
Where I would like to come back to the director's whole mission and all that. Because the core of what he's saying is something not only that I agree with, but it's something that I've said on previous podcasts of one of the mini shows I've been on. I don't remember which one. That there was a famous quote that you can't make an anti-war movie. Because the moment you put war on screen, it looks super badass. It just looks cool. It's spectacular. It's exciting. Your heart gets pumping. And the moment you put something on screen, it looks good. You know, if you're showing somebody pooping on the toilet, that shot is still going to be framed up in a way, and the actor is going to be someone who is attractive enough to be an actor. It's going to be lit in just a way to strike the eye. Like, everyone involved in that scene is trained to make something you want to watch, because otherwise, what did you pay for? So if they try to make a movie with some, message about, crime is bad or war is bad, the moment you have it in the hands of people whose entire job is to make this look cool, and these actors are all charismatic, and you like watching them, you enjoy watching them interact and do their thing. It's all lit beautifully. These are beautiful people acting out things. That any attempt you were trying to make about the thing being ugly is lost. I don't think he's totally wrong about that at all.
His statement about Schindler's List, where he says the moment you make the shower, whether or not gas or water is going to come out, the moment you turn that into a form of like in almost like a horror way.
It's suspense.
Suspense. Yeah. The moment you turn that into a scene of suspense, you're doing something that's kind of fucked up, because you're turning it into a form of entertainment, even if the form of entertainment is supposed to teach you that these things were bad. I get the idea of what he's saying, for sure.
Yeah, I don't specifically agree with all of it, but there's like, I mean, like in that specific instance, like, Spielberg's intent is to make you experience it, as most people would have. But I think there is definitely a lot of truth to what he's talking about. Because as soon as you said there's no anti-war movie, I was like, well, what about like Platoon or Jarhead? And it's like, well, those are still starring gorgeous people that are lit cool.
I think he's an extremist.
Yeah, for sure.
But it makes it very important to listen to him, because I think that's what's great about the Judd Apatow clip is because he's being very extreme, and then the shot pans to someone who doesn't think about that at all, or John Krasinski, who you could argue is making CIA propaganda.
Right.
It's the idea of like if I could take one of those two, I would take the guy who's actually thinking about what it means to show things in movies.
Right.
To think about the responsibility of what they're doing.
Krasinski,
and that's why
he literally does a Jim from The Office face when it cuts over to him.
Yeah. It's incredible.
God.
And so that's what it is like, no, I don't fully agree with this guy, but what he's saying has to be in the back of every filmmaker's
it's
mind.
important, and I think this is not necessarily a fun movie to watch. We talk about how its intent is to like punish you, but what he's saying is really important, and it's really important for anyone who makes movies or creates any kind of art or storytelling that lots and lots of people consume. It's important to be responsible about what you're showing and what your intent is, and just be, no, you don't necessarily have to be as extreme as this guy is, but it's like Dave was saying, it's something that we all should keep in the back of our minds while we're doing this. Like,
right.
What does this mean that we're doing this?
Yeah, and that's why I say that this director would probably hate the way I enjoy this movie, because my whole thing is I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of horror movies in every genre, and it is the rare movie that gets me, where there's imagery that sticks in my mind, like the Suspiria remake did that. It takes a lot. So for me, if anyone out there, if you're a horror movie fan and you kind of like you feel like modern horror is just very boring and it's all just about a wet old woman who's died and is haunting your home or whatever,
right,
this violates all of those rules that make horror boring to you, and it will surprise you in a way that horror should if it was really doing its job. Mm-hmm. So I enjoy it as a horror film on a very shallow level. It did not make me think, you know what, actually movie violence is wrong, because I will watch another violent movie next week and it will be fine. I will enjoy
sure.
it. Mm-hmm. So it is great for a conversation starter. It's great to discuss. It is also, in my opinion, just a great piece of horror cinema, because kind of in the same way that, this is going to seem like a real stretch, but a lot of the conversation around H.P. Lovecraft gets into the fact that he was one of the most racist people in history.
Yes.
Like, even for his era, he was racist.
Yes.
Yes, he was pretty racist.
This is true. This is a true fact.
His horror stems from his racism. His place where he had, because he had a thing, as far as I could tell, where he was like deathly afraid of like germs and sickness. And so he saw like foreigners as being like filthy. And you hear this language in like Trump speeches, like they're bringing diseases. Like there's a lot of science and brain science around people who are like naturally xenophobic or scared of immigration or anything like that. They also tend to be germaphobes, because there's some brain thing where people who are not from our tribe are, they're filthy, they're disgusting, their habits are gross. So from his weird mental place, he accidentally made earth-shattering horror, like groundbreaking horror that every horror writer now does Lovecraft. Like all of the monsters, have tentacles because of Lovecraft. Mm-hmm. But his terror of anything different from him made him imagine a cosmos that was full of these big, ugly, writhing things, right? Because that was his whole. It was like he's manifesting his mental illness. Yeah,
there was two things at work with him, which is interesting that they would connect in such a way to produce the horror that he wrote. One was he was a tremendous racist, So it's all that otherism. And two, he had like this weird obsession / fear with stuff like non-Euclidean geometry, and like just gaps in scientific knowledge really scared the shit out of him. So it was like those two fused together to make, the groundbreaking horror that he wrote, which is interesting.
So here it's almost the opposite, where you have a creator who is not interested in making horror, but is coming at it from a very pious and almost preachy place, accidentally, because of that place he's in mentally, made great horror. Do you see? I mean, like in both cases, like their personal hang-ups about certain things wound up creating something that maybe they didn't intend. Like, for all I know, H.P. Lovecraft, like, all he wanted us to take away from his work is that you should never leave the house. Right. Because everything outside of your personal neighborhood is just a nightmare. But, that's one thing about, like, trying to separate the work from the creator. I try to do that. Like, the people listening to this who know that I write novels, like, I'm doing Lovecraftian horror, or else, like, a parody of Lovecraftian horror. Like, I cannot separate myself from Lovecraft. But when I read his work, I kind of mentally tell myself, well, he's not still profiting from it, and I don't take away from this. You should be scared of your neighbors who moved here from El Salvador. Like, I don't take the ugly lesson that whatever was going on in his brain, and that's how I excuse myself, because it's like I'm separating the message from it. Well, with this movie, I may be doing the opposite, where I'm just enjoying it as a piece of horror, but I'm kind of detaching it from what he was trying to do, because ultimately it's the death of the author thing. Like, once the piece of work is out there, unless you specifically went to go find his interviews, then you're not even going to know what he intended.
Right. I do think it does come out a little in the way the movie is made, but I think you'd have to like again, in the cinematography and stuff like that, but
you feel it
for the most part
more than you know it. Like, it's the way he leaves you feeling that, like, your friend who turned the movie off or hated it, like, just didn't like the way it made him feel, right?
Right, exactly.
But didn't know they had watched
the thing.
They just watched an essay against, like, film. Because if an American set out with this mission, you would get freaking natural born killers. Like, you would show a killer watching a horror movie and then going out and killing people, and that's how they would beat you over the head with, like, see, movie violence made him really violent.
Right. And this is just how the story's being told for the most part. And how it all works out. Like, it's so simple. Mm-hmm. Again, not even showing much of the violence. Like, what did they have to do? They bought, like, a bit of fake blood for this movie.
There's just the one effect when Peter gets shot and flies back against the wall.
Right, that's it. Yeah.
And for a jaded film watcher like me, or horror film watcher, again, as I mentioned earlier, I can't remember the last time blood and guts scared me or alarmed me or upset me or anything.
Right.
Because at this point, I'm just, like, impressed with the effect.
It has to be pretty extreme for it to bother me. Or to get me in, like, an kind of way,
Yeah, and it's usually something like really visceral, like in Black Swan, like the cutting her fingernails, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Suspiria remake. I'm gonna assume it was the scene where the girl is dancing and just breaks all her bones.
Yeah, and it's the way it's performed, and it's extremely realistic and convincing, and at that point where she like pisses herself because her body is being like twisted, and it's just. It takes a lot. It has to be really, really well done. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm coming away from that saying, wow, she really performed that scene well. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's this guy's entire point. And that's why this movie is such an effective piece of art to me, because his entire thesis is that most movies have a layer of safety and comfort between you and what's going on the screen. Mm-hmm. When you watch that huge battle scene at the end of Avengers Endgame, you're not like, oh my gosh, all those people are dying. Like, it's just a CGI effect. It's like you are sitting there knowing you are completely safe. And it's the same thing when you watch Death Wish or any movie about crime. It's like you're not the victim of the crime. You're not in danger. And so it's just, I'm going to inflict harm on you through the screen to make you feel a tiny hint of what these people are feeling, and to get you to where you do not want to see what happens next. Like, you don't want, and the whole thing where he's like, if you stayed, like, he wants people to walk out in this movie. He's like, if you stayed for the whole thing, then you apparently needed to stay for the whole thing. Like, you needed to see where this goes. But if you walk out, then good. You're a better person.
It reminds me a little bit of Old Boy as well, because that's another film that betrays its audience to sort of make the point where they're like, "Oh, you want a revenge movie? All right, here you go. Oh, you feel good now? You feel good now you've watched this?" Like, it's I really, because we're talking about the idea of like gore doesn't really bother us anymore. So it's like, what's left? And it's like, it kind of has to be this, right? It has to be a movie that just doesn't do the thing it's supposed to do in a horrifying way. That really, like, I get why this bothers you, you know?
Yeah.
To the point that it's, I'm trying to think of other movies that have done, now that we've recited some other examples, I'm trying to think of other movies that I've seen in my life where I walked away. I think one example, like, I think Quentin Tarantino's best movie is Reservoir Dogs.
Right.
And because of what he did, which at the time, it came out in 1992, I saw it, I thought was genius. Which is, you see them, this gang, it's this heist movie where, one, you never see the heist, but it starts out with this bunch of guys talking at a diner, and then you realize they're criminals of some kind. You see one of them has a gun, and then it cuts to a guy bleeding in the back of a car, and he's been shot in the gut. And it's a wound that is not going to kill him, but it is unbelievably painful. And you just see him writhing and writhing and writhing with pain, and they get to this warehouse and haul him in there, and he's laying on the floor and he's bleeding, and he's just writhing, and he's begging to be taken to the hospital. For the rest of the movie, you are scared of someone getting shot, because he has established right at the beginning, getting shot is horrible. It's not fun, it's not cool, it's not just a sport. It is incredibly painful, it's degrading. Like, the guy can't move. There's nothing heroic about it. He's pathetic. He's pale and sweating just from the pain, and his body's going into shock. And for the rest of the movie, that hangs over you, because there's constant confrontations, and it gets more and more tense, and guys are getting in each other's faces. Everybody's got a gun, and you are rooting against anyone getting shot. And even though it is a heist movie, it's a violence movie, even though Quentin Tarantino would make his career off of, like, blood and guts slapstick, that I realize makes the opposite point. In that movie, I admired that so much, because it was the first time, I would have been a teenager when I saw it. It was the first time in my life, for a kid who loves action, loves horror, that's always been me, where I was scared of someone getting shot. Like, I wanted these people, when they were, like, arguing, I wanted them to calm down. I was like, chill out. Don't, it doesn't need to come to guns here.
It's introducing a world where you realize there's no cinematic justice, where it's just going to be, it is what it is. Yeah. Which Tarantino used to be so good at. That's what bothered me about his later films, because he's actually doing the opposite, where he's doing, like, the extreme, like, the fantasy endings. Like, Django Unchained has this very unjust ending, where Leonardo DiCaprio's character seems to have won, and you're like, shit. That reminded me of a film like Old Boy again, but then he sort of just goes, never mind, it's going to be a big shootout. And I'm not sure... I feel like that's less effective than a movie like Reservoir Dogs, where things just sort of happen.
I don't know.
The comedy version of it is a movie like The Nice Guys, where he goes to break into that house or the apartment, and he wraps his hand and he breaks a window, and then he accidentally cuts himself, and then it becomes a real problem, and then he has to go in the ambulance.
He's just like, shit, and then he holds his, and the next scene he's in the back of an ambulance, and the paramedic says, we're losing him.
And they're like, we're losing him. Yeah. Because that's how it would actually go down. You can't just break a window with your hand. You might cut an artery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And comedy could do that. Comedy, that's like a staple of comedy, is like, we're going to take these tropes and turn them on their head, and so you're expecting this and you get that. it's the rare horror movie that does it.
Yeah.
Because horror, I get asked in interviews, it's like, well, the horror out there, like, what went wrong in your life that made you want to write horror? It's like, or what did you, because they want, I guess, some backstory. That's where, it's like, I don't know. It's like I was raised by a cult or something and it damaged my brain. But from my point of view, the whole reason you enjoy horror is that you watch it and it's scary, and then even if the characters die at the end, the credits roll and the movie's over. Like it's like waking up from a nightmare and realizing the nightmare wasn't real. Like, you having the dream that you're back in high school and you're having to take a test that you'd never been to the class, but you've got to take the test and you forgot your locker combination and all that stuff. But then you wake up, and that when you wake up from it, that's like the best moment because you realize it wasn't real. And with horror, that's the whole thing. No matter how gory or ugly it gets, it is just a movie, and the movie's going to end, the light's going to come up, and you're going to walk away. And it's like, well, my real life isn't nearly that bad. And that's why we think horror is fun. It's like a roller coaster. It's like you were never in danger, but you tricked your body for a moment into thinking, it's like, we shouldn't be taking this turn this fast. This is dangerous. But of course, no, you were not in danger. It was just, and then the ride ends and you get off and you laugh at how scary it was. Horror to me is like very wholesome in a way because it kind of takes you to a world where morality is simpler. There's a monster. He looks like a monster, and usually they defeat him at the end, or if they don't, he'll be back, but it's fine because by like the third movie, he's like the hero, like the Freddy Krueger. By the third movie, he's this wisecracking goofball, and little kids are dressing up as him for Halloween, and I don't know. It's not. It usually doesn't reach out and really, grab you unless you're really sensitive to certain images or things like that. Most people, you're not traumatized by it because, again, there's this deal you've made with the audience that this is fun. We're having fun here. You're not actually going to run into a house full of chainsaw wielding, cannibals. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen in your life. So we're going to have fun by imagining a world where that's the kind of thing that happens to people. This movie follows you out of the theater.
Yeah.
Yep. Even it does it by breaking even the horror movie rules, where like we all accept that the hero might not win at in the end of a horror movie. Mm-hmm. Films like The Omen or The Exorcist, where like there's sacrifices.
Well, the heroes still win in The Exorcist, but yeah.
But
they get to be heroic. Is the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They get to look cool. They get to, like, if they fail in the end, it's like they gave it their all.
The Omen's a good example of like him failing horribly.
Yes. And
just coming out like a nutball. But it's still there's still like certain rules to it. It's funny now that bringing up The Omen is actually kind of similar to this movie because the villain has ultimate power. And as much as they try to stop him,
there's nothing
the villain ultimately, there's nothing they can do.
They can do about it.
But they still are able to create it. It's almost like more action-y. There's a little more hope in The Omen. They're making progress.
Yeah.
This movie is like, no, we're never leaving this house.
Yeah, and they never make any progress.
Yeah, there's no progress. It's just, you're stuck here with us.
Yep.
Every time you think maybe something is going in a way that can help them, nope. Absolutely not. Yeah, I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
We didn't ask each other how we liked the movie.
I enjoy the movie's intent more than I actually enjoyed the movie. Like I respect what it's saying. I respect the way it was executed. It's probably not a movie I'll watch again, at least not in a while.
Oh, I will never watch it again. Why would I? I got it.
I got it, man. There's no reason to experience this again.
there's some cool filmmaking things that can be appreciated. There's a lot of craft in this movie that to make it do what it does, and a lot of the choices they make. We've talked about the music and score, or lack of score, things like that. There's a lot to go back. That's not. I'm fine reading someone else's take on that.
Right. I don't need to pop this bastard on again. That's not happening.
I'm still very tempted to watch the remake, but I know that it's just going to be this.
It's going to be exactly the same, just with Naomi Watts and Tim Roth.
I can't imagine it being as scary. The fact that it's more, the location's more familiar, and the actors are actors I've known.
Right.
It's just, it's not gonna hit the same way. But some of your listeners who don't like to read their movies know that the remake is not some cheap cash grab. It's the same director going literally same script, shot by shot, line by line, intentionally try to make it the exact same movie. But for example, the actor that plays Paul is incredible in that movie, in that role. Like he is so hateable that I can't even imagine who in all of Hollywood history. Because if you're like, well, if you're naming me some famous horror villain, it's like, no, you don't get it. He's loathsome in a way that doesn't even fit in like movie world. Like movie villains are always kind of cool, or they're so awful that it's kind of cartoonish or something like that. We love our villains that are kind of charismatic because that's, in horror, it's all about the villain. Usually it's all about the quality of the villain. Here, gosh, the way he plays it, his mannerisms, he's so repulsive, but not in an over-the-top way. He doesn't wear a mask made of human skin. He's not anything. He's just this guy. It's a guy you've met before, and there's just like nothing inside him. You never learn why they're doing this. You never know, and you're denied that. There's no origin story. And I would love it if some American producer out there was like, we ought to make a prequel to this, like an origin story of where these guys came from, like how they were abused at the tennis school or something. And
this director would set himself on fire if that.
Yeah, because you're denied everything you want. You're denied the moment of the glimpse of humanity. You're denied the moment where they fail or where they realize what they're doing is wrong, or they have that, as you mentioned earlier, the conflict between the two of them that would maybe give you an opportunity. You're denied everything you want in this movie. Whatever you want, you are not going to get it.
Oh man, yeah, it's
so much fun.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's quite a film.
If I had Jeff Bezos money, I would make this director. I would give him any amount of money he wanted to make like a Transformers movie. And be like, no, you have no rules. You don't have to make it anyway.
Make it your own Transformers. That would be the
make
biggest.
Make your own Transformers.
The mightiest troll of all time would be to
so
give this guy a Transformers movie.
Yeah.
Now there are people out there.
Say whatever you want.
There are people out there in your audience that know this filmmaker very well, because he's actually made several things that were award-winning, like.
Oh yeah,
like film festival favorites. It's like
Amour. He won, or he didn't win. He got nominated for Academy Awards for that one.
And the movie The White Ribbon. I think I heard Michael Swain bring that up just on a podcast we did the other day. So again, there are people out there that are huge fans of this guy and maybe kind of frustrated that we're like struggling to pronounce his name. Like he's made a lot of movies, and they tend to be. It looks like the theme of like. The unflinching reality of, because there's some that deal with like elderly people struggling with life and the indignity of all the ravages of old age or dementia or something like that. And it's like kind of, I'm not going to pretty this up for you. Like I'm going to show you, the ugliness of this period of life that movies don't. Like he clearly kind of has that sensibility. And I get the sense that he makes some great cinema because of that. He's coming at it from a particular place.
He's got a pretty interesting filmography. I'm gonna have to watch some of these movies.
And I want to see a Transformers.
Yeah, do a Transformers.
You do it if you're like, look, you never have to get funding for another one of your sad movies again. Another one of your depressing real movies.
Yeah,
just do one Transformers.
Yep, just one Transformers in your set.
This is the process in Hollywood now. Is basically if you make one well-regarded indie movie, your very next film is like
it's a Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a Star Wars, or it's you get Captain Marvel 2 or whatever.
The one that always gets me is the director of Downfall, the Hitler movie, the meme movie,
the Hitler meme movie,
which is that's another terrifying film, and it's another movie this director brought up. But he went on to do the Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, Invasion.
Sure.
Because he came to America and they were like, great Hitler movie. You want to do a pod person film? And he's like,
yeah. Well,
all right.
it's like the Troll Hunter and Autopsy of Jane Doe guy. They're like, you want to do scary stories to tell in the dark?
And it's like, great, thanks.
Sure.
and then he went back. He went back to Germany. He was like, all right, that place.
I'm done with that shit.
Yeah, that place sucks.
Make another movie about Hitler freaking out on meth in his bunker.
Yeah.
See, I don't know if I could ever watch Downfall as a movie because I've seen 8,000 memes where they've done the new subtitles, and I would just the whole time I'd be chuckling like.
It's good, but like
it's really good because what you're watching is like a Jonestown.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you realize. It's a horror movie in the sense that you're watching a death cult.
Mm-hmm.
They're poisoning their kids. You know, like they're killing themselves,
and
it's
their
all falling
families.
apart.
Yeah, and
you're not.
Yeah, you don't feel bad about it, but it's like he's just in a full blown meltdown, and it's really good. It's very well done.
You feel bad for like the kids.
Sure.
They show the people who still not like who don't understand what happened. But yeah, you don't feel bad for I don't know Hitler.
Not shedding any tears.
You know,
for
like
Hitler.
oh poor Hitler. They show how they failed, and that scene is basically Hitler realizing that they failed.
Yeah, it's him having a full blown Trump meltdown, pretty much.
Yeah,
it's so sad that there are so many great films in my life where, because, like the movie North by Northwest, I think is considered like a classic, but to me, it's that movie where that crop duster almost hits the guy who's running away from it. And like that's the only scene in the movie. It's that scene where that plane almost hits that guy. Because if anyone mentions it in a montage or they refer to it, it's always that same shot.
Right. As far as you know, that movie is Jaws, but for crop duster.
Right. It's just about a guy trying to get away from a crop duster.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I Love Lucy was a show about a woman who worked on an assembly line and stuffed chocolates into her shirt because for some reason that one sequence is the only thing. That show was like, they made like 2,000 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and it was someone's having a conversation, they refer to I Love Lucy. They will cut to a shot of her in front of the conveyor belt with the chocolates going past, and she like can't keep up with them. And it's like, oh yeah, it's that show where that lady worked at a chocolate factory. It's so sad because there's all of this nuance and everything, but it gets lost.
It's you should see North by Northwest, man. Cary Grant kicks Martin Landau off of Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
You would, from the crop duster scene, you probably would not guess that that's where that movie ends.
But why is that not the shot they show us every time they want to reference that movie?
Just throwing Martin Landau off of Mount Rushmore.
Same thing as there's like a whole generation of kids that like The Godfather is just a guy in a tuxedo saying, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And that's it. That's the entire 9 hours of that saga. It's just that one line of that guy who sits in the dark in a tuxedo with a cat, I think he had at the time. It's like the whole thing gets boiled down to that because that's the line, buddy. That's. But anyway, it's the last thing on this is that we kind of touched on this, but my least favorite genre of anything is the don't you feel bad for watching this thing. And the reviews that came out about The Last of Us 2, the game where it simultaneously is trying to tell the story about the futility of revenge, but the gameplay loop is you just murdering people in spectacular fashion. You can just
amazing.
And you're going to kill
amazing murder.
500 people on the way to realizing that violence is wrong. And there's many places in the game where you can't necessarily stealth past the enemies. That was part of my beef with the first game, where it's like your mission is literally kill everyone in this abandoned hotel.
Right.
You cannot advance until you kill them all, and then you have like a cutscene where we're supposed to feel bad about I get it, and I think from their point of view they're like, well, yeah, but that's better than just glorifying it. Like we're trying to at least put something in there. Same as
it did. The second one did it really well. I think it was if you didn't play it.
I did not.
I don't want to spoil anything, but it takes exactly what you're talking about and uses that as part of the message.
Yeah, it sort of uses that against you.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Like these days, I can detect when a movie it's about like the trauma of war, yet when they shoot the war scenes, I felt like the Hurt Locker did this. Like the scenes where he's diffusing the bombs and stuff, it makes it look badass. It makes it look...
It still has to be... It's still got to be cool.
Director of Point Break. It's going to look awesome.
It's going to look awesome. And he's very handsome, and he's very charismatic, and the bad guys are bad, and... I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to condemn anybody. I'm not trying to be preachy by saying your preachy movie is garbage. It's just that one reason why this movie stands out with me is because normally, like obviously Natural Born Killers was... Oliver Stone is not a subtle filmmaker and is not...
No.
And it is not subtle enough to pull this off. Whatever you like or didn't like about Starship Troopers, it's not, Paul Verhoeven, not subtle as a satirist. And
yet somehow people still miss it and like that in like RoboCop.
Yeah, you can't. It's true that you can't be too blunt with your message for many audiences.
There was we saw Paul Verhoeven talk about Starship Troopers not too long ago, and they talked to him about that, and he was just like, "Yeah, I don't understand. I literally put them in Nazi
He's
outfits.
Like, I literally dressed them up as Nazis. I don't know how anybody missed it."
Yeah, but people did.
And anyway, it's actually hard to think of a good example of a movie that's done it well, because even like the Purge movies, where it's like, deep down, if we all had the chance, we would all murder each other, which is not true. It's such a paper thin premise, but even then, like they make sequel after sequel because people go to see it. It's like, well, it'd be cool to live in the Purge universe. Like it's, the bad guys are all like in elaborate masks and stuff, and it's an adventure.
And the heroes all look like Frank Grillo.
Right, and they're also those movies are trying to say stuff about class and like say, oh no, the Purge is bad, but it's like, stop making it look so cool. It's definitely, I don't think movies have to not make the movies they're making. I think the lesson is like to do a better job at showing these things. Yeah,
depiction is the problem.
Like when a character, this is such a little thing, but when a character like cries in a movie, there's so many times where they're still trying to look like attractive, and it's Hollywood.
No, man, yeah, like, give us a full-on ugly cry.
Yeah, I want to see a snot bubble.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Which is done in this movie, not a snot bubble, but like the part where they react to their kid being killed is they're horrified. They're wailing out.
That wailing was oof.
It's the little things. It's like, do the extra effort. If you're going to have violence in a movie, make it violent. And by that I mean make it upsetting. I don't need to see someone's skeleton pop out. I just need to see see it. Well, yeah. But I need, like, obviously it depends on the movie.
Right, yeah.
Too. But like, show the gravity of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the best example I know of recently, which is that, Hollywood, you can get a PG-13 in a film in which 8 million people die. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As long as, like, you shoot someone and maybe there's like a little bit of a CGI blood splatter and then they fall out of frame. As long as you don't show consequences, it's PG-13. Right. If you show that person's intestines spilling out and them screaming in pain, that the pain you just caused them because bullets tear your body up. Like a shot to your shoulder, you're going to have pain in your shoulder and limited movement for the rest of your life. That bullet will shatter bones, it will tear ligaments, it will destroy things that can't be repaired.
It's also, there's an artery up there, so it's like potentially fatal.
Exactly. But if you showed the actual consequences, like if you showed Captain America beating up those people on that boat at the beginning of whichever Winter Soldier, whatever that was, like if you showed him, like a guy getting his jaw broken and the guy like gagging and struggling to breathe, and like his lung has been collapsed or his trachea has been collapsed because he hit him in the neck with his shield, and the guy's like struggling to suck in air and like vomiting, it would get an R or an NC-17. Well, which is the message would you rather show children? That hitting someone in the neck just makes them fall off screen and now you can go win the prize, you've done the heroic thing, or actually showing what that does to a person? The way we have it is backward, where And this is exactly what this guy is saying. That you sanitize it. It's like, well, we'll make this safe for the kids by making the violence look easy and clean and like it's an effortless solution to all of your problems.
Right.
To where even if you have the hero spare the villain at the end, the villain will inevitably, as you said, do something that forces him to kill him anyway. It's like, yeah, I made the effort. I didn't want to do it.
I think it's not just violence. Like we talked about fascism and like that in an Avengers film where it kind of glosses over, it sugarcoats it. There's also stuff like, alcoholism. Like they never showed James Bond waking up having like shit his bed, like hungover and out of control. Like they don't, like movies sanitize everything. It's just that violence is one of the most like notable ones.
Yeah. Or how easily Tony Stark got over his PTSD.
Right.
Even though he endured many, many more traumatic events after
multiple layers of PTSD.
Right. And again, going back to Shane Black, who made The Nice Guys, he's the only one who did that in any of the Iron Mans. He's like, this guy would have horrible PTSD, so let's actually make it part of the movie.
Yeah, he saw aliens emerge from a hole in the sky. And now knows that can happen again at any moment.
At any time.
He would dream about nothing else.
Yeah. That'd be it for him. That's all that he would be talking about.
Oh, man.
Yeah. This movie, I appreciate what it does for that reason.
Yeah. Do we have any final thoughts? I feel like we should probably... We're approaching 2 hours.
I know. As is customary.
Right, as is the way.
Yes.
I'm worried that anybody that only listened to this and without watching the movie, I mean, if for some people this is a perfectly good substitute for having watched the movie, because this podcast will not traumatize you in the way that the movie probably would.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those who have seen it, I hope this helped you appreciate it more, because I think some people who watched it probably did come away with it just saying like, oh, that's trash. I guess just...
Right.
Yeah, you could definitely... Like, this movie dares you to keep watching. It's so unpleasant.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah,
that's our endorsement of this movie.
That's the best thing I can say about this movie. Art
should make you feel things. And so many movies you watch, you forgot about them 5 minutes after the credits rolled, and you forgot you even watched it. This is another movie that I brought where you will not forget that you watched it. That's my promise.
Yeah, I think the key to this film is show it to your friends. I used to do this with Old Boy. You show it to friends who are like, who've seen it all, who like horror movies, and you watch them just feel bad.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you should watch.
And then they're like, why did you do that to me? It's like, I don't know, because it's funny. Because I knew what you would go through.
Yeah,
after
I wanted to watch
this.
somebody else go through this.
Yeah. Yeah. Have yourselves a nice little night. Watch this, follow it up with, like, I don't know, Antichrist, The Lawrence von Trier. Just like make a night of it.
Yeah.
Of just feeling real bad.
Yep.
The good movies should be like a prank you can play on someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Just deprive them of sleep for the next 2 nights.
Okay, before I go, I'm here. I've got a book that came out this week called Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick. It is not as alarming as this movie.
Yeah.
But I feel like the title pretty much conveys the tone.
I will say, having read it, you do subvert tropes and have fun with tropes within the book.
Yeah,
and it was very entertaining.
No, that's I'm gonna toot Jason's horn. That's the thing that you do in pretty much all your books. Is do something that's like, oh, that's not what I expected at all.
Yeah, this book's no different. It's really fun.
Yeah,
I don't want to spoil anything.
People should buy
but
it.
I stayed up till 4 a.m. finishing it on a night where I was like, I'm just gonna read for an hour and go to bed. And then 4 a.m, I'm like, God damn it!
You're the second person that's given me that compliment, and that's about as good as it gets. The other person said they stayed up till 3:30, having to finish it. But if you read the book, if in the first half of the book, if you can predict where the second half goes, I will send you $1,000. That is my promise. That is I think the publisher No, I'm being told not to promise that.
No, they're shaking their head.
I work really, really hard to give you plots where it doesn't go where you think and not necessarily where you. It is not. I am not out to abuse the reader, like this movie was. But yeah, so it's and you can. I have other books out there. You can read the customer reviews. They're all pretty positive. But that's I'm making the podcast rounds, trying to get people to buy this book in the middle of a pandemic.
I mean, shit. What else do people
what
have
else
to do?
are you gonna do? Read
It's
the
just
book.
it is our time we spent struggling against like the social media algorithm. It cracked.
Yeah.
Trying to promote something on social media right now on the cusp of this world-changing election in the middle of this world-altering pandemic, pretty hard to break through.
Yeah.
Right.
People's streams of information to advertise a book. Facebook is not favoring it's buy this book posts as opposed to Trump outrage or here's the latest thing that's going to kill you posts. So,
right. Look, money might not exist in a year, so why not use yours to get this book?
Money might not exist in a few months.
Yeah. So just get it. You know,
Get it now. Get it while the getting's good.
Enjoy it now.
it will take your mind off things for a little bit. However fast you read it should successfully distract you from what's going on. Because if you've been like me and walked away from your day job several months ago and you to assume a full-time job of scrolling through your phone.
Yep.
Because you're so scared if you don't look at your phone that things will somehow get even worse. It's like as long as I'm watching the news, it can't be that bad. It's like that superstition people have about sports. Like if I root for the team, then they'll win. Well, that's my thing.
Right.
If I keep scrolling through Twitter, then the outrages will stay under control. Like because I'm watching them and. Yeah. So if you like me are addicted to just endlessly scrolling through headlines and things that upset you, here's something that will distract you for a couple of days, depending on how quickly you read.
Yep. Yeah, check it out.
That's all I can do.
Good.
That's the only service I can offer humanity right now. I'm sorry. This is the best I've got.
It's something though.
Yeah,
it's
it's definitely something.
Yeah.
Dave, tell them about something else.
All right. Well, we have a Patreon. Patreon.com/GamefullyUnemployed. If you go on there for $5 a month, you can have exclusive podcasts like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman and Fox Mulder is a Maniac. Go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, we also have a store at tpublic.com/store/gamefullyunemployed where you can get t-shirts, masks, mugs, stickers, posters, all kinds of stuff. We have a brand new shirt that is Mitch Pledge's face, his police sketch from the 1989 Wes Craven film Shocker.
Yeah.
So, please check that out.
For all you Shocker fans.
All you Shocker fans.
Easily 3 times an episode, I hear the title of a movie I've not thought about in 20 years. Like, oh yeah, I hear a reference as if everyone knows. Well, yeah, we've got the Shocker shirts out.
It's a popular touchstone for people. I think that's a sode. All
right.
Say goodbye, everyone.
Everybody say goodbye.
And audience, I will probably be back to discuss that movie where Mel Gibson plays Santa Claus.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, thank God! Yes,
Yeah, we have to talk
We're
about
doing
that.
it.
Is that actually coming out at Christmas, or is it coming out sooner? When does that come out?
I mean, if they're smart, it'll come out at Christmas. That'll really get everybody's.
Yeah.
It's perfect encapsulation of everyone's holiday spirit this year.
Yeah, perfect Christmas film.